Britain does country driving rather well. Winding lanes through Somerset at golden hour, hedgerows brushing the wing mirrors. The particular satisfaction of knowing the back roads, the routes that sat-navs cannot comprehend. Evening light on Cotswold stone. The freedom of a B road that leads somewhere only locals remember. But some roads carry warnings that do not appear on any map. Scattered across these islands are stretches of tarmac where locals will tell you, without a trace of humour, to be home before dark. Not because of dangerous bends or poor lighting. Something else. I have gone through county archives, police incident reports, and local testimonies to bring you 15 roads where something is documented, repeated, and unexplained. Some are famous. Some are known only to those who live nearby. All of them are real. Let us begin in Scotland, where the most documented case in British road history awaits. A 30-mile stretch so active that transport police maintain files they would rather not discuss. The A75 runs between Annan and Gretna in Dumfries and Galloway. To look at it during daylight, you would see nothing remarkable. Flat farmland, the distant shimmer of the Solway Firth, lorries heading for the ferry ports. But after dark, this road becomes something else entirely. On the night of the 22nd of October 1957, Derek Ferguson and his brother Norman were driving this stretch when their headlights caught something impossible. A large hen appeared in the road, then a cat, then more animals, too many to count, rushing at the windscreen. Then an old woman ran straight at the car. Derek slammed the brakes. Nothing there. They drove on. A great furniture van hurtled toward them, forcing them off the road. It vanished before impact. That night, they encountered screaming creatures, eyeless faces pressed against the glass, and phantom vehicles that existed only long enough to terrify. The brothers reported everything to police. Their account remains on file to this day. What makes the A75 exceptional is not the Ferguson incident alone, but the decades of reports that followed. Phantom trucks appear in rear-view mirrors and never pass. Figures stand at roadsides and vanish when approached. Hauliers who run this route regularly speak of colleagues who refuse night shifts on the Kinmount Strait. One transport company operating from Carlisle confirmed in 2012 that 3 of their drivers had requested permanent transfer from the Scotland Run, citing experiences they would not discuss in detail. The road earned its reputation. Locals do not dispute it. They simply drive home before sunset. Travelling south into Kent, we find Bluebell on the A229 between Maidstone and Rochester. This stretch of dual carriageway passes through the North Downs, cutting through chalk hills that have been walked for thousands of years. On summer days, the view across the Medway Valley is magnificent. On certain nights, drivers encounter a woman who should not be there. On the 19th of November 1965, a Ford Cortina carrying 3 young women crashed on Bluebell Hill. Judith Lingham was due to be married the following day. She died at the scene. Her friends Suzanne Brown and Patricia Ferguson also lost their lives in the wreckage. Since that night, drivers have reported striking a young woman on this road, stopping their cars in panic and finding nothing. In November 1992, a driver named Ian Sharp was so convinced he had hit a pedestrian that he flagged down a passing motorist and insisted they call police. Officers searched the roadside with dogs and torches for 2 hours. They found no body, no blood, no evidence anyone had been struck. The Kent police file on Bluebell Hill contains multiple similar reports spanning 5 decades. Drivers arriving at Maidstone Station, shaking, certain they have killed someone. Officers returning from the scene with nothing to show for their search. Some locals believe it is Judith, still trying to reach her wedding. Others say the phenomenon predates the 1965 crash. The hill has been associated with strange sightings since the Roman road passed through here. What drivers see may be older than any of them can explain. Crossing into Devon, we reach Dartmoor and the B3212 that connects Moreton Hampstead to Princetown. This road passes through some of the most desolate landscape in southern England. Prison walls rise from the mist at Princetown. Ponies stand motionless beside the tarmac. The moor stretches away in every direction, empty and old. The hairy hands first appeared in records during the 1920s. Motorcyclists reported feeling invisible hands wrench their handlebars, forcing them off the road. In June 1921, Dr. E. H. Helby, a medical officer from Dartmoor Prison, was killed when his motorcycle inexplicably veered into a ditch. His children, riding in the sidecar, survived and described their father fighting something they could not see. Weeks later, a coach driver reported large, hairy hands appearing on top of his own, dragging the steering wheel toward the verge. He fought them off only by wrenching with all his strength. The reports continued through the 20th century and into the 21st. In 2008, a couple driving the B3212 at dusk described their steering wheel turning sharply right, as though gripped by someone determined to send them into the ditch. They were not touching the wheel at that moment. They stopped and turned back the way they came. Dartmoor has always carried strangeness, but this road concentrates it. Whatever manifests on the B3212 predates the tarmac, predates the motorcar, predates anything we might call modern. It's simply adapted. The A616 Stocksbridge Bypass in South Yorkshire should not be haunted. It was built in 1988, carved through the Don Valley to relieve traffic from the old road through the village. Fresh tarmac, modern engineering, a road with no history. Except the reports began before it even opened. During construction in September 1987, security guards patrolling the site at night reported seeing a group of children dancing in the foundations. When they approached, the children vanished. The guards, experienced men who had worked building sites across the north, refused to return after dark. In the same month, 2 police officers responding to a call about suspicious activity on the unfinished road encountered a hooded figure standing on the bridge. As they approached, it disappeared. Their official report remains in South Yorkshire Police archives. Both officers requested transfer to different divisions within weeks. Since the bypass opened, reports have not stopped. Figures have been seen at the bridge. Children have appeared in the adjacent fields where no houses stand. A monk has been reported walking the hard shoulder. Vehicles have experienced sudden electrical failures at the same spots. The bypass was cut through land that local historians warned about during planning meetings. Medieval settlements once stood here. The Church of St. Mary, demolished in the 19th century, occupied ground the road now covers. The warnings were noted and ignored. The budget could not accommodate a reroute. Now the road carries whatever was disturbed. 36 years of documentation suggest it will continue. The A666 runs from Bolton through Lancashire, through countryside that should be unremarkable except for the weight it carries. The road number alone draws attention. Locals insist the designation was deliberate, though the Department for Transport maintains it was simply the next available number in sequence when the road was classified. The route passes through Pendle Hill country, where in 1612, 12 people were arrested for witchcraft. 10 of them hanged at Lancaster Castle after a trial that documented accusations of murder by curse, of familiars summoned from shadows, of pacts signed in blood. Elizabeth Southerns, known as Demdike, Anne Whittle, known as Chattocks, their families and neighbours. Most were old, poor, and female. All were convicted on evidence that would not survive a moment in any modern court. 400 years later, the shadow persists. Accident statistics for the A666 show a rate consistently higher than comparable A roads in the region. Police traffic analysis from 2019 could not identify any infrastructure cause for the discrepancy. Drivers report figures stepping into the road who are not there when vehicles stop. Animals that appear in headlights and vanish before impact. A persistent sense of being observed on stretches where the road runs closest to Pendle Hill. The hill itself is visible for miles, watching everything. It watched the trials. It watches the traffic. The locals do not make jokes about the road number. They have lived with that hill too long. Snake Pass connects Sheffield to Manchester across the Peak District on the A57. It is one of the highest roads in England, climbing to over 1,500 feet before descending through bends that demand full attention in any weather. It is closed more often than any other A road in the country. Snow, ice, fog, flooding. The road fights back. But locals distinguish between the physical dangers and the other reports. The mist on Snake Pass behaves strangely. Drivers describe fog that arrives too quickly, too thick, in conditions that should not produce it. Within that fog, figures appear, walking the verges, standing in the road, gone when the mist clears. Some drivers report arriving at their destinations unable to account for time. A journey that should take 40 minutes has taken 2 hours. They cannot explain where the time went. They do not remember stopping. There is no mobile phone signal for much of the Snake Pass. No houses, no witnesses. If something happens, you are alone with whatever the moor provides. The mountain rescue teams who operate in this area have their own stories. They do not share them with newspapers. But among themselves, they acknowledge that this road holds more than bad weather. Scotland's A9 runs nearly the length of the country, from Falkirk to Thurso, over 270 miles of single carriageway and duelling through some of the most dramatic landscape in Britain. Long-distance lorry drivers know this road intimately. Some know it too well. The phantom hitchhiker of the A9 appears in reports spanning decades. The pattern is consistent. A driver stops for a figure at the roadside. The figure climbs into the back seat. The driver continues the journey. At some point, usually when approaching lights or another vehicle, the driver glances in the mirror. The back seat is empty. Reports concentrate around Drummochta Pass, where the road climbs to over 1,400 feet and the landscape empties of all human presence. In winter, this stretch can close for days. Even in summer, the isolation is profound. One haulier, interviewed by a Scottish newspaper in 2005, described stopping for what he believed was a stranded motorist near the Drummochta summit in February 1998. The figure sat in his cab, said nothing, and was gone by the time he reached Inverness. He stopped taking night runs on the A9 after that. The company did not argue. Are they echoes of travellers who died on this road? Warnings? Nobody knows. But truckers who work the Scottish routes have learned not to stop for anyone after dark. The B4293 near Raglan in Monmouthshire carries reports of something that predates Christianity in these islands: the black dog. Welsh folklore calls it the Gwilgi, the dog of darkness. It appears throughout the British Isles under different names: Shuck in East Anglia, Padfoot in Yorkshire. But the reports around Raglan are concentrated and consistent. The animal described is the size of a calf, with eyes that glow red or burn entirely black. It crosses the road in front of vehicles and vanishes. Those who see it report overwhelming dread, a visceral certainty that something terrible will follow. In folklore, sighting the black dog means death is coming, not necessarily for the witness, perhaps for someone they love. Modern drivers on the B4293 report the same creature their great-grandparents described, the shape moving in peripheral vision, the shadow crossing the headlights too large to be any natural animal, the terrible certainty that they were not meant to see it. Locals drive faster through certain sections. They do not explain why. The explanation would sound ridiculous to anyone who has not driven this road after dark. The A470 runs 186 miles through the heart of Wales, from Cardiff to Llandudno. It is sometimes called the spine of the country. It passes through valleys that once held communities, through landscapes shaped by industry and loss. Some stretches pass reservoirs that drowned villages. The water that English cities demanded covered farms and schools and chapels that had stood for centuries. The residents were moved. The graves were exhumed and relocated, but something remains beneath the surface. Drivers on the A470 report figures at roadsides who vanish when approached, lights in valleys where no buildings stand, sounds that should not carry through closed windows. A persistent sense of being watched by something that resents the road's presence. When water levels drop during dry summers, remnants emerge from the reservoirs. Stone walls, foundations, evidence of what was taken. The road passes through country that holds memory differently. The English built these roads. The Welsh remember what they covered. The M6 is Britain's longest motorway, running 232 miles from Rugby to the Scottish border. It was built in sections through the 1960s and the 1970s, cutting through farmland that had been worked for centuries and following routes the Romans laid down 2,000 years ago. Motorways should not be haunted. They are too new, too ordinary, too relentlessly functional. But the M6 carries reports that suggest otherwise. Near Stretton in Cheshire, drivers have reported seeing Roman soldiers marching across the carriageway. Legionnaires in formation, carrying standards, moving as though the motorway were not there. The sightings are brief. A heartbeat of impossibility in the headlights, then nothing but tarmac. Phantom trucks appear in mirrors on certain stretches and never overtake. Eddie Dawson, a lorry driver from Lancashire, stopped for a woman on the hard shoulder near Warrington in October 1974. She was distressed, asking for help. He radioed for assistance and turned back to speak to her. She had vanished. The hard shoulder was empty in both directions. The M6 follows ancient ground. The motorway engineers built on top of history. But history, it seems, has not been entirely buried. The A23 between London and Brighton passes through West Sussex countryside that looks entirely ordinary from the road. Near the village of Bolney, traffic flows past fields and woodland at the national speed limit. Nothing suggests the stretch deserves attention, but reports of a woman in white have accumulated since the 1960s. She crosses the road in front of vehicles. Drivers brake hard, but the collision they expect never comes. She is simply not there when the car stops. Some witnesses describe her face as anguished, desperate, turned toward them as though pleading. Others see only a shape, white and moving, gone too quickly to process. There is no recorded accident on this stretch that explains her presence. No young woman was killed here whose story matches the apparition. She does not correspond to any known fatality. Perhaps she predates modern records. Perhaps her story was never written down. The A23 maintains an accident rate on this stretch slightly higher than comparable sections, despite road improvements and reduced speed limits. Highways England cannot explain the statistics. Locals can. They simply know to watch the left side of the road near Bolney. Cannock Chase in Staffordshire covers 26 square miles of ancient woodland and heathland. Roads cross it, connecting the villages that cluster at its edges. After dark, some of those roads carry something that disturbs witnesses more deeply than any conventional ghost. Since the 1980s, drivers have reported children with entirely black eyes appearing at their vehicles. They approach windows. They ask for help, for rides. Witnesses describe overwhelming dread, a visceral wrongness that freezes them in place. The children do not behave like children. They speak in flat tones. They do not blink. Their eyes have no whites, no iris, nothing but black. Reports concentrate around specific roads through the chase. One incident documented in 2014 involved a woman who found a child standing beside her car when she returned from a walking trail. The child asked for help finding its mother. The woman looked away for a moment. The child was gone. Cannock Chase holds layers of history. A German military cemetery dates from the First World War. Ancient woodlands were cleared and replanted. Iron Age settlements lie long buried. Whatever manifests here wears the shape of children, but carries something older. Local families know which car parks to avoid after dark. The warnings pass from parents to children. This is not folklore anymore. Living caution. Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire is military land. It has been since the army requisitioned it for training during the First World War. The roads that cross it pass through a landscape that looks almost extraterrestrial in its emptiness. No houses, no villages, only the occasional tank crossing sign to remind you where you are. Some of these roads pass through what was once Imber. In 1943, residents were ordered to leave within 47 days, so the army could train for D-Day. They were promised they could return when the war ended. The war ended 80 years ago. They never went back. On the few days each year when the military opens the roads, visitors can drive through Imber. Stone cottages with collapsed roofs. The Church of St. Giles, maintained by volunteers. The ruins of a community that was stolen and never returned. Those who have driven these roads after dark report figures at the windows of ruined buildings. Lights in structures that have no electricity and have not had electricity for generations. Movement where no one should be. The army does not encourage civilian access. The roads are not maintained for public use. But locals who remember what Imber was, whose families were moved from these homes, still make the journey when the gates open. The land does not forget. Neither do the people. The roads through Brecfa Forest in Carmarthenshire pass through one of the largest woodlands in Wales. Commercial plantation covers much of it now, neat rows of spruce planted in the 20th century. But beneath the plantation lies older forest. The ancient woodland was here before the Norman conquest, before the Romans, before anyone kept records. Drivers on the forest roads at night report something pacing their vehicles through the trees. Not on the road, in the darkness between the trunks. Keeping pace with the car, visible only in fragments, never clearly enough to describe. Engines have cut out at the same locations, restarting only after minutes of silence. Mobile phone signal does not reach into Brecfa. The nearest help is miles away. Local farmers avoid the forest roads after sunset. They cannot articulate exactly what they are avoiding. The shape is never clear. The presence is unmistakable. Whatever watches from Brecfa is patient. It has been watching longer than the roads have existed. It will continue watching after the tarmac breaks and the forest reclaims what was planted over it. All 15 roads share something fundamental. They are transitional spaces, between places, between times, between what we understand and what we cannot explain. The A75 has more documented reports than any other road in Britain. But every road on this list carries the same message. The land remembers. Those who drive these stretches after dark are not alone. Whether you believe the explanations or not, the experiences are documented. Police reports, witness statements, patterns that repeat across decades. The warnings persist because the phenomena persist. If you have driven any of these stretches after dark, or if you know of roads in your own area that carry similar warnings, I want to hear from you. Comments from people who actually live with these roads are worth more than any archive. These roads exist whether we drive them or not. The warnings, whether spoken in pubs or passed between generations, are worth heeding. Some roads are just roads, others remember. Knowing the difference matters.